let's figure out who.
Oh, yeah, what are we missing?
Well, we could do that when we get to Toastmaster.
No, we get our general value.
Oh, yeah. General value.
What if you do our county, I'll do general evaluation.
All right, we're missing a lot of people, but I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 5:31. Thank you for joining us for today's meeting, theme about sports. I'm gonna pass it over to our Sergeant at Arms, to lead us through the pledge of allegiance.
Woo-hoo! Can everyone please rise and repeat after me quietly. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Our Toastmaster today is here, so I'm thankful. Eric Stepper.
There.
Good evening, it's my privilege and pleasure to be your Toastmaster. Barbara, would you like to be our counter or general evaluator?
I can do all counter because I've done that before.
Kathleen, would you like to be general evaluator?
I can.
I can do both.
That's okay. I just don't really remember what my role is, but I will work on it.
I'm glad to have this opportunity to work this out during the meeting, so we have less time for general evaluation. This is Rob's opportunity to tick off women. But let's see what happens. As Toastmaster, the theme is got sports, question mark. As Toastmaster, it is my duty to make sure the meeting is run well, and we have just taken care of all the changes in the lineup. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to our general evaluator, who will review her team. Kathleen.
Hey, Kathleen.
I'm delighted to be the general evaluator for a crack team of maybe 2 people. 2 very talented people, possibly 3. We are not having any formal speeches today, so we don't have any regular evaluators. My job will be to evaluate the meeting as a whole, as well as supervise and crack the whip on my talented team. I will start by introducing our timer, and I presume that's Lloyd.
Hey, Roy.
Thank you, Kathleen. The only thing we're going to be timing tonight is table topics. You'll see the green at 1 minute, yellow at 1.5, and red at 2 minutes. And then, yeah, that's it. That's the only thing that gets time on that. So thank you, Kathleen.
Hey, Kathleen.
Thank you, Mr. Timer. They're out of order. Do we have a grammarian in the house?
We do. That would be Dean.
Dean, could you introduce yourself and tell us about your role? Welcome, Dean.
Sure. I usually like to find interesting words that aren't used that often and are consistent with the theme of the day. I did a Google search on sports today and found out that there are hundreds of words to a couple thousand words related to sports. Very few of them looked all that unique or interesting. So I picked one that kind of jumped out. It's interference. I wrote a little bit in the chat feature of Zoom, but I will go over it again because I didn't put everything in. I couldn't figure out how to copy and paste everything out of my write-up. So interference, the act or process of interfering, something that interferes, obstruction. 2, the illegal hindering of an opponent in sports. Conversely, it's also the legal blocking of an opponent in football to make way for the ball carrier. 3, confusion of a received radio signal due to the presence of noise or signals from 2 or more transmitters on a single frequency. 4, the mutual effect of meeting of 2 wave trains, light or sound, that constitutes alternating areas of increased and decreased amplitude. 5, partial or complete inhibition, sometimes facilitation of other genetic crossovers in the vicinity of a chromosomal locus where a preceding crossover has occurred. And if you understand that, you're way smarter than I am. 6, the disturbing effect of new learning on the performance of previously learned behavior with which it is inconsistent. An example, we had to put up with loud noise and constant interference from the neighbors. I will keep track of the word of the day, and we'll also give credit for interfering or interfere. I will also be looking for exceptional uses or abuses of the English language. Back to you, General Evaluator.
Thank you, Mr. Grammarian. That was a very thorough and excellent report. I am going to introduce our off-camera. I expect no interference or obstruction as she comes forward to tell us about her job. Barbara, off-camera.
Thank you very much. As the off counter, it is my job to take note of overused words, fillers, or sounds, and that includes or use and, well, so, but, like, the one that I like, and I mean, or you know. Back to you.
Thank you, Madam Off-Counter. I am wrapping up right now. I will say the meeting is off to an excellent start. It's an A+++ for the new OWL system. It can only be downhill from here. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
I don't know why she said downhill from here and introduced me, but I'm not going to take umbrage. Let's do an experiment here. We're going to clap and see if it's really egregious.
Okay.
Is that better on the L system or not?
It actually goes silent after it gets to a certain decibel. We can't hear the clapping.
So then it doesn't mess with the interface. So clapping is okay, or you want us to set in?
It's up to you guys. What do you think, Dean? Do you think they should do the silent or clap?
It doesn't matter. It does, you're right, it does cut out, but that's fine. I know you're clapping.
That's the idea, so that it doesn't run over onto the next, which was the problem before.
That's solved. That's good.
I'm desperately trying for clarification on the meaning here, because otherwise we're gonna have 4 table topics each. In that vein, Dean, do you have another 7 or 8 definitions of interference? Kind of things. We, in true Toastmasters fashion, we just got the OWL installed and we know how to do it in a true Toastmasters fashion. We made a good effort. And Lloyd was reading the instructions. We got it to work. So we didn't have any interference from technology tonight. I'm just very pleased about that. I've run out of stall tactics. So let's bring up our table topics now to Mr. Rocktail.
Hello, sports fans. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You're probably wondering why I'm dressed the way I am today. Football season is upon us. High school football officially begins next weekend. I'm ready, excited. I hope you are as well. We're not just talking about football though. We're talking about all sports. I'm assuming that everybody watched a little bit of the Olympics. I'm assuming that everybody knows that the United States of America garnered the most medals in the Summer Olympics. Not only the most medals, but also the most gold, the most silver, and the most bronze medals in each category than any other country in the world.
I did not know that.
Very impressive. My first question is, what sport or sports did you most enjoy watching? And what sports did you enjoy watching the least? And I'm going to start with you, Vicki.
Well, thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. I was just one of those people that watched highlights of the Olympics. I did not actually partake in any particular one genre or sport that I had to see. I would just watch the highlight reel. And I felt that it was very interesting to see how different coverage was done. And I liked the Snoop Dogg and Kevin Hart show that was on Peacock, I believe. I was actually watching it on YouTube, but they would do a commentary at the end of the day, kind of as sportscasters do, but they would put their comedic flavor onto it. And so that is actually the most that I watched about the Olympics was the commentary afterwards. And I did partake in watching the gymnastic highlights. It's amazing what some of those people can do throughout the sport. And my thoughts were with Simone Biles when she went through her ordeal that she was going through. And I felt that this Olympics just gave us a new eye as to how things are going. I look forward to Paris, and it'll be interesting to see how Olympics go from there. Because as Lloyd had pointed out, it is very expensive to have the Olympics, and it sounds like perhaps things are going to change a bit as the Olympics proceed in future years. Back to you, Mr. Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Vicki. I want to stay on the Olympics. There was at least one sport that I thought was very silly and frankly should not have been part of the Olympics. You may feel otherwise. This particular sport was called trampoline gymnastics. I could not embrace that as an Olympic sport. If it were up to me, we would replace that with a sport that is becoming worldwide, front and center, even in our community, called pickleball. I think that would be a good replacement for that particular sport in the Olympics. Lloyd, I'm going to ask you if you felt there were any sports in the Olympics that should not have been in the Olympics, and what would you replace it with?
Thank you, Rob. That's an interesting question because I thought that the sports I liked the least were things like swimming, track and field, basketball. Way too much of that stuff. I don't think there was enough of like the trampoline gymnastics. I watched a little bit of that. It wasn't my favorite, but I wanted to see things like archery and real world sports that average people can. The sport I would replace in a heartbeat if I could is swimming. Endlessly repetitive. Here's the 50-yard swim, the 60-yard swim, the 70-yard swim. It goes on and on and on. You know, that's why the swimmers can earn so many medals. It's because there are so many highly similar races and whatnot. I do away with that. Basketball, it's not much of a question who's going to win. The Americans always win that. Track and field, that's a little bit better, but I wanted to see more of the field games, things like shot put, javelin, hammer throw. that sort of thing, as opposed to the running races. They're again, very repetitive. If I could come up with a new sport, is that pretty good question, a new sport? I think they're doing a pretty good job. They added things like skateboarding and that sort of thing. I think that's okay. Baseball and softball both came back this year, mostly because Japan is crazy for baseball. But I'm not sure we're leaving out any sports.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lloyd. He mentioned the U.S. men's basketball team, which actually lost their first game in the Olympics this year against the Italian team, I believe, or was it the French team? I can't even remember. Ultimately, it didn't matter because the U.S. team prevailed at the end. Thanks for that clarification, it was the French team. I want to turn to the NFL. And this question is going to be for Dean. I would like to know, what is your favorite team or teams in the NFL and why?
Well, thanks, Rob. My favorite team is the Green Bay Packers, largely because I grew up there, but they also have some other likable characteristics. First of all, they're a community-owned team. There is no owner, no billionaire owner. And I'm not that much against billionaires other than the fact that I'm not one, but it's just kind of nice to have a team owned by the community, essentially. If they were to ever sell the team, all of the proceeds would go to a charity, the name of which escapes me at the moment. But coming from Wisconsin and still having family there, I know that the Packers are the biggest thing in Wisconsin. Of course, the Milwaukee Bucks won the NBA championship, so they're catching up, and we're partial to the Brewers also. But the Packers, you know, they just have a long and storied history. They're one of the oldest, if not the oldest team in the NFL. They've generally had a pretty good franchise over those years. They had some dry spots in the 40s and 50s, and again in the 80s, where they didn't do too well. But since about 1993, when Brett Favre came to the team, they've done really well because they've had two franchise quarterbacks, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And I've very much enjoyed watching them over the years, even though they've broken my heart on about 100 occasions. But a couple of Super Bowls made up for that. Back to you, Mr. Table Topics Master.
Very good. Dean, I've watched Aaron Rodgers since he played college ball at Cal. And I've always liked him. Not a big Packer fan, but I understand why your heart is with that team. One of the things that has always troubled me about the NFL is that the players are paid millions of dollars. This is their job. Their job is to perfect a skill, and that's playing football. And yet, I see so often in the games silly mistakes being committed by the players. Eric, how do you feel about the fact that they make all this money and yet they cannot perfect the skill of playing football?
Thank you, Table Topics Master. This has always been kind of interesting to me too, that there are silly mistakes, and teams practice and practice and practice, and I played football, and you get sick of practicing, and why do these things happen? But I also know from playing that you've got so many things that you're processing from so many different stimuli, from so many different directions. It's hard to get everything straightened out in the heat of the battle. Everything is real time and it's different every time. So I understand that happening. One thing that I have enjoyed lately is, like, for example, Russell Wilson. He's the highest paid player in the NFL. but he spends $1 million on keeping his body and mind right. He's got psychologists, he's got all kinds of treatments for all kinds of different parts of the anatomy, diet and stretching and flexibility and strength. So I appreciate that, and we're seeing more and more of that coming about, where the players put back into their vocation those millions that come out. There's also those that don't, they're boneheads and get paid a lot of money. I understand that. But it's a real dichotomy, and it's not black and white, and it's not clear. But yes, when my team makes a bonehead play and loses the game, I'm upset, and I might even have some bad words. But I don't let it interfere with my enjoyment of the game. Thank you, Dick.
Very good. Thank you, Eric. I would like to turn to college football. Actually, college sports in general. Kathleen, are there any college sports that you enjoy watching? And are there any that you simply do not watch at all? Kathleen.
I am not very well acquainted with college sports. I attended the University of Maryland on the Eastern Shore, the Fighting Seagulls. We absolutely did not have a sports team, not even one. I did eventually go to the University of Maryland to pick up my last few credits, but that was just the last few credits. I didn't pay any attention to the sports team. Not a big college sports watcher. I married someone who loves watching college sports, not professional, like college. He's an Oregon Duck. Our house is full of duck hats and paraphernalia. We even get the Duck channel on the TV, pay extra for it. I'm okay with all of that. I confess, I went to my first college football game within the last 2 years. I've never been to one of them. It was the University of Washington Huskies. Would they be playing the Ducks? I don't know who they were playing.
Yes.
I think they were playing the Ducks. We had the nosebleed seats, which was great because I had never watched football play out. You're usually watching on TV or you're kind of down low. I discovered that when you were up high, you could actually see the plays moving in different directions, and it made just a tiny, tiny bit of sense. But that experience didn't interfere with my basic nonchalance about college sports.
Good job.
Mr. Toastmaster, Mr. Tabletop.
Well, I'm not familiar with the Fighting Seagulls, but I am familiar with the University of Maryland Terrapins. And the University of Maryland Terrapins have the most unique looking helmets. They are so colorful, and it almost is dizzying to look at the helmets that they wear because there's so much going on there. Anyway. This question is for you, Barbara. I would like, and the group would like to know, where did you graduate from high school? And do you still follow any of the high school sports from your high school? Barbara.
Thank you, Table Topics Master. Actually, I'm very excited about this question because I was very nervous with all the rest of them. I do not follow any sports whatsoever. I don't know anything about different teams, except for I have a sweatshirt from the Santa Cruz Banana Slugs because I thought it was funny. I have no idea for that. So high school, I graduated from Eastmont High School quite a few years ago. We won't go into that. And I do not continue to follow Eastmont's current games. However, for a short time, from when my son was a freshman to when he was a senior, I did sit in the stands for Wenatchee High School and cheer on Wenatchee High School Panthers, which, as you know, caused a lot of distress with the people that I graduated with. So when I went to one of those reunions, I had to admit that I was now a Panther, wearing Panther gear, and it did not go over well. I was treated as if I was I deflected. Yes, I can't think the word that I was treated. I was definitely not one of the members of the Eastmont crew, and I didn't feel very welcome with talking about Eastmont alma mater. So, kind of a long road to say, no, I do not follow Eastmont. I do follow Wenatchee High School still, though, because I do have some friends that kids are playing.
Very good. I believe the word that she was looking for was ostracized.
Yes, that was it.
To the point where Barbara no longer goes to East Wenatchee any longer. That's why she lives and works in Wenatchee.
Let's put in the slugs.
Lloyd, I'm going to ask you this. Did you play high school sports? And if more than one, what sport did you enjoy playing the most?
Thank you, Rob. I played baseball for first year and a half, about season and a half of my high school years. I wasn't good enough to make the varsity, and I knew that. Everybody knew that. Coach knew it, all the other players knew it too. But I lucked out because halfway through my junior year, the guy who was the manager who did the scorebook quit, got mad and quit about 5 minutes before a game. And Coach Hooper was beside himself. For some reason, he and the other coaches didn't want to do the scorebook. They always had a manager. So I told him, well, I know how to do a scorebook. I read a library book about how to do scorebooks for various sports. And so he said, good, you're in. I said, yeah, but we're going to negotiate here. I want a varsity lifer. I want to be manager, and I'm not going to carry the bat bag around. The bat bag is a big canvas bag full of baseball bats, very, very heavy. And he said he was in a spot. I mean, the game was coming up. So he said, okay. And I did that. I was the manager for the next 2 years and did the scorebook, and everything worked out great. So the answer to your question is no, I really didn't play a sport, but I had a much better experience than most of the people on that team did because the team stunk.
What a great story. Vicki, are you raising your hands? It looked like you were raising your hands. Thought maybe you had a question for Lloyd. Dean, if you could have played any sport growing up that you didn't play, what sport would that have been? Dean.
Thank you, Rob. That's a pretty easy one for me. Ice hockey, beyond a doubt, it would be ice hockey. Of course, that's an expensive sport. There aren't really that many ice rinks and not that much opportunity to get to play. And that was certainly true of where I grew up back in the 60s and 70s. I didn't really start watching ice hockey until the late 90s when my dad kind of turned me on to it. And I started watching and I thought, wow, this is really a pretty fun spectator sport. And it sure as heck looks like a lot of fun to play. The action is so fast. It's a good workout. It's got probably a little bit too much violence for my taste, but I did play football, so I probably could have gotten used to it. But certainly ice hockey. I do ice skate a little bit, not very well. because I really haven't done very much of it since I was about 12. But I really, really wish that I would have had the opportunity to play ice hockey because it really, really looks like a lot of fun. Mr. Table Topics Master.
Very good, Dean. For me personally, the sport that I would have liked to have played growing up was water polo. Unfortunately, water polo was not a sport that was available to me in high school. I just admired those people treading water for an extended period of time, having the ability to swim back and forth and then shoot that ball in the goal and not be out of breath. I just think that they are amazing athletes, and that would have been one sport that I would have liked to have played when I was younger. Vicki, you have children who are probably involved in sports. Let me know, and the group know, are there any sports that you would rather your children did not pursue? And if so, why?
Well, thank you, Mr. Table Topics Master. My children played the t-ball and the soccer growing up. And it was my youngest son who really took to sports. And he liked ice hockey and I liked ice hockey. So I was all for it. And he had a great time. However, as Dean said, it is an expensive sport. But the times that he was playing was just great. And I'll tell you, as a fan of hockey, when you're watching the action of the professionals and they get into their, disagreements, we'll say, it's okay and it's entertaining. But let me tell you, from a mama's heart, when your kid gets checked into the boards, I was almost on the ice to protect my kid because it was just one of those things of like, oh no, you're not going after my kid. And the thing that really got me though was his team jumped out and got the guy off of him. And I was like, oh wow, this sport really is one where your team has your back. And I'm glad that he didn't go further in hockey, that it was just kind of one of those fun sports and that he didn't lose any teeth or anything like that. But that was the sport that as a mom, it was hard to watch, but I knew he enjoyed it. Back to you.
Very good. Well, I know we've got oodles of time left. I don't want to bore you with any more sports questions. However, if there are any of the questions that I've asked, and if you haven't done 2 table topics speeches, if you would like to take one of those speeches or one of those topics and share with the group, Kathleen, I can tell you're ready to come back up here. Please do so. Welcome back, Kathleen.
I'm going to tell about my favorite Olympics. We were living in Portland, Oregon. It must have been the Winter Olympics. In Portland, you can still do stuff in the winter. It rains, but it's not very cold. We had a wooden deck out beyond our kitchen and living room. I had been cooking on the Weber grill. I had one of those chimneys. You use those chimneys where you put the charcoal in and the newspaper underneath and you light it. Did it all the time. Got the Weber going, went out, dumped the coals into the Weber grill, set the cylinder down, went back in and sat down. I was sitting on the floor with my back to the couch. We were all around the TV watching the Olympics. And I happened to glance to my left. And through the window, I could see that my deck was on fire. There's a fire, I said. Everybody jumps up. Everybody runs up to the deck. Everybody but me runs to the fire to look at it. They're all on fire. I grabbed the hose, turned it on, and put out the fire. I learned my lesson. 2 lessons. Be more careful with the cylinder. Now I put it in a little metal container whenever I take it off. And you cannot depend on other people to help you put out a fire.
Thank you, Kathleen. Due to a shortage of players on each team, I'm going to call this game over, even though we have more time for table topics so that we can address potentially other things during the meeting. And if anyone has a problem with that, I assumed responsibility 30 minutes before the game started. I'm in control and I can terminate the game early. And anybody doesn't like that, they're gonna get a flag. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator. I think. Table. Toastmaster.
I applaud Rob not interfering with our mental health and making us do more table topics. I'm always geared to do one, maybe two. Let me call up our general evaluator to get this meeting going on the evaluation part.
Yay.
Get this fist bump thing down. As general evaluator, I will first call on my crack team, and then at the end, I will give my own evaluation of the meeting. We'll start with Lloyd. Welcome, Lloyd, our timer.
Yay, Lloyd.
Thank you, Kathleen. We did very well with timing tonight for the first round of table topics. Vicky, 143. I was 147, Dean 154, Eric 140, Kathleen 155, Barbara 143. And for the second round, I was 137, Dean 125, Vicky 129, and Kathleen 140.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Timer. I'd like to call on our grammarian, Dean. Could you do your report, please?
Yay, Dean.
Yeah, certainly. I must say that I don't have too many comments on the grammar, partly because I was so engaged with listening to the responses to the table topics, which created interference with my poor thinking process. But I did pick up on several uses of the word of the day. And I might have missed some because there was some garbled transmission of voices, but I heard Kathleen use it at least once. Barbara used it at least once. I heard Eric use it 3 times. And if any of the rest of you used interference, I apologize for missing it.
Thank you, Mr. Grammarian. So sorry about the hockey thing. That was the sport I wanted to be into. I'll introduce our off-camera, Barbara.
Yay, Barbara.
Oh, this is fun.
So I also, Dean, had a bit of a brain interference early on, and Lloyd and Victoria, we both got away with free speeches the first 2 rounds. And I realized, yes, I was the off counter, and it kicked in. So for myself, I had a couple of ums, a few so's, and a repetition. Eric, just an and a but. Rob, again, for the, I don't have anything for you at all. So I'm gonna say, I'm gonna just say that was perfect. Perfect score.
Thank you.
Lloyd, for your seconds, I had 2 so's, that's it. Victoria, for your second, I had an a few ands, and 1 so. Dean, I had 1 well and 3 buts. But for your second, I had a perfect score. Kathleen, one, and for your second one, I also.
Yay,
Good job, everyone, tonight.
all right.
Back to you. Thank you, Madam Law Counselor. I have a few comments about the meeting overall. The first thing, as I already mentioned, I thought the owl is fabulous. Before we close, maybe we'll get some feedback from the Zoomers, but for those of us in the room, it was a big improvement in how what we could see on the screen and how it moved around. Thank you, Barbara, for arranging that. Also have to say, for those of you who aren't here, and this might tempt you, there's a bowl of candy in the middle of the table.
An
That was
owl
a nice
and
bonus. Table topics, great questions. It was a good subject, there's a lot of substance to it. You could go in lots of different directions. I want to take issue with Lloyd's comment that we should do away with swimming. They will never do away with swimming because of the bodies in bathing suits. Even I found that really interesting. Swimmers have giant torsos and shoulders. Green Bay Packers, are those the cheeseheads? Or is that the wrong team, Gene?
Are they the what?
The cheeseheads?
Yes.
Are they the ones that wear the cheese on their head?
Oh, yeah, the cheeseheads.
Okay, I'm guessing that you have one of those in your house somewhere, so next time I'd like to see it.
Okay. We do in fact have one, yes. They're surprisingly heavy.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
probably the amount of beer you can drink.
Well, you have to quit when your head's too tired to hold it up anymore.
Barbara, I appreciate your Santa Cruz banana slugs sweatshirt. I think your collection would be complete if I could get you a fighting seagull.
It would be.
Go.
They should fight, they should like play against each other, right? Don't seagulls eat banana slugs?
That's a very good point. We would be dominant. Those are my comments for the meeting. And I'm back to the president or the?
Back to the
Back to
president.
the president.
President. Thank you. Madam Postmaster, and I'm gonna actually put it right back to the Vice President of Education for any announcements, right?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. You know, the other mascot that always intrigued me was the Irvine Anteaters. I don't know where they come up with some of these mascots. It's even like my high school alma mater. We were the Waterville Shockers, and people say, what are shockers? Well, that will be something I'll share with you another time. As far as announcements, I don't have any at this point, other than I do want to check with the collective to see if we are still going to meet in person next week and going forward. I hope we do. I think if we can mask up, and I apologize for taking mine off, that we can still meet in person here. Now that we kind of have the technology set up, I think it would be ideal. I realize that Dean may not be able to join us for a while, but I hope that others in the club will be able to join us. Jackie, of course, will not be able to for a while. But I would assume that everybody would be in agreement with that, that we will continue to meet in person. Everybody feel good about that? Oh, there we go, Vicky. I was waiting for that. Honestly, I don't have anything else to share with the group. Lloyd, do you have anything that you would like to share?
Dues, club dues are going to be due October 1 at the latest, but we want to get that done so that Eric doesn't have this thing drag out for weeks like it sometimes does. And the amount is 54. Oh, I thought it was 46.
Well, no, it's 56 for 45.
Vicky, can you not hear?
I can hear.
Okay,
$11.
Oh, okay. Okay, so 56, and we'll figure out how to do this, but anyway, get it done as quickly as possible.
I would agree. I wish my Rotary dues were only $56. They're a little bit higher than that.
Okay, so I do have an announcement. The conference started today. The opening ceremonies were a couple hours ago, and they had a keynote speaker. So if, I'm not sure exactly which ones are free. There are certain areas of the conference that are free, or you can pay the $25 for, I believe, the contest, to watch the contest. I don't know exactly what else, but it started. The technology is a lot better this year. Last year, there was difficulty getting onto the platform. This year, it seems to be running a lot smoother. So I encourage you to check out what you can for the conference. And then also, I don't know if you all received the email or saw that, but they are changing up how the first level of pathways will be, starting with your next path. Because if you've already purchased a path, you'll complete it as it is, but they're switching the path up now a little bit for the next one. So great things are happening with pathways too.
Great.
Thank you.
And then just one final word, actually,
I just wanted, could we get some feedback from the Zoomers about the technology?
yes. Would you like to give us any feedback on how things work today? Those of you on the Zoom.
Dean, do you want to go first?
Sure. I wish the sound was better and maybe we can play around with that. I'm not sure where your speaker is, but some of you, like Rob, you come through loud and clear, even with the mask on. Others, not so much. And I'm not sure if it's the mask or the placement of the speaker or both. It would be really nice if they had one of those little clip-on speakers that you could put on your shirt or lapel. You might try moving the speaker around in different places. I know when I used to work, we had these big speakers that would sit out on the table. And if you got too far away, meaning more than say 5 feet, it just didn't do a good job picking up the sound. So maybe it's speaker placement. Maybe there's another one that could be used. I'm not sure.
Dean, is it the people who are speaking up at the podium that you still have trouble hearing?
Sometimes, yes.
But I will say, this is a lot better than we have had.
Yeah.
And I think it'll just be a practice of seeing where to place the owl. And I find it very interesting, the picture that the owl is broadcasting from is at that very top is a panoramic view. And then it goes to the different speakers, which I find very interesting. And even as Lloyd was the timer, it went to him and I could see it quite well. So that was a plus. And I just think that we just need to play with the placement a little bit better, and that people need to remember that when they're at the podium that they need to be speaking forward. Some people talk to the side and it's been difficult to hear. So it's just one of those things of remembering where it is. And like Rob, your computer is the camera at the podium. And so people there might want to remember to be looking into that camera rather than looking up at all of us, because those of us on Zoom have been looking at your chin. Just a thing to remember about that. But yeah, it's a thing that we're learning, and every week it gets better.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, this owl thing is literally brand new, just in the last 2 or 3 days. It's infinitely better than we had last week, that's for sure. And I think as everybody figures out how to use it, we're gonna be able to solve the problems.
Last word from me for everyone here in the room, as well as those on Zoom. I encourage you to consider doing a speech, because if we don't have speeches, next week the theme will be got milk, and it's going to be a lot of questions about dairy, and you don't want me to be the table topics master talking about dairy products. Madam President,
Okay. Please, someone. Go ahead, sorry.
I think probably what we could do is get that speaker put in up there too and have both of them here and make sure anybody speaking comes to the podium. And I'm guilty of stepping back. So I need to get right here close to the speakers. Can you hear me now?
A little better, because
Better.
before you were, it was really hard to hear you, but now it's better.
Well, Rob's got a booming voice and we have to realize, myself and Barbara, the five ones here, need to realize that we need to talk about Kathleen and Boyd and that. But we can try that because I don't know why they're speaking down there. If we have everybody speaking from the podium, so we might try that.
Yeah.
I'd also like to just say that Rob had great table topics. That sports is kind of a tough one because there's people, male and female, that do sports and don't do sports. And everybody did good answering the questions. I appreciate that. And I've been in, Lloyd's been a long time. I think this is the first costume table topics master we ever had.
Thank you. I agree. I think they were great questions from, and thank you for challenging us all. I will adjourn the meeting a little early today.
great.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Yeah, thank you.